In the shifting landscape of retail, companies have recently raised their prices, a decision driven by the pressing weight of tariff pressures. This sudden adjustment has sparked concerns among consumers, who now find themselves questioning the affordability of their everyday purchases. Amidst these challenges, Shein is contemplating a bold move to relocate its manufacturing hub to Japan. This strategic shift not only highlights the ongoing uncertainties in trade, but also signifies a broader trend sweeping through the fast fashion industry, where adaptability has become paramount. As we delve deeper, it becomes evident that the average package value from Shein and Temu has notably dipped below previous estimates, casting a shadow on their market standing. Consequently, companies have pivoted their focus towards larger trade items, seeking to recalibrate their strategies in an evolving marketplace. Examining the trade dynamics between the US and China, we uncover a complex web of mutual interests, where both nations strive to safeguard their respective economies. This delicate balancing act is vital not just for them, but for the stability of the global market as a whole, influencing economies far beyond their borders. Turning our gaze to a pressing global concern, we find that food insecurity is on the rise, threatening millions worldwide due to an array of factors including conflict and economic shocks. Addressing these urgent issues calls for immediate international cooperation, along with effective strategies that can bring about meaningful change. Furthermore, the impact of climate change on food production cannot be overstated. It significantly exacerbates existing vulnerabilities in regions already grappling with economic hardships. Therefore, embracing sustainable practices is not merely a choice, it's an essential step towards mitigating these escalating risks. In this intricately connected global economy, local markets inevitably feel the reverberations of international fluctuations. This interconnectedness often leads to pronounced effects on prices and the availability of goods, underscoring the need for a keen focus on developing resilient local economic strategies. As the climate crisis unfolds, we face severe risks including flooding and deforestation that demand our urgent attention and proactive planning. Unfortunately, environmental issues frequently lack the prioritization they deserve within government budgets, leaving communities vulnerable. In response to these challenges, the Nigeria First policy emerges as a beacon of hope, highlighting the crucial need to prioritize local goods and services in government procurement processes. This initiative aspires to diminish dependency on foreign products while nurturing local economic growth. However, to ensure fairness in these public procurement processes, transparency and competitiveness are essential. By preventing nepotism in hiring practices, we can foster a system that maintains public trust, ultimately benefiting the community as a whole. Broader economic strategies that extend beyond mere public sector rhetoric hold significant importance in tackling inflation and navigating the complexities of global supply chain disruptions. A holistic and comprehensive approach is crucial for fostering sustainable economic development. It is worth noting that the operational challenges faced by the industrial sector often stem from competitiveness issues rather than a mere consumer preference for foreign goods. Addressing these challenges could pave the way for revitalized local production and economic resilience.
In the vibrant realm of the fashion industry, the importance of local sourcing shines brightly.
There is a pressing need for accessible platforms that facilitate material procurement, which in turn can invigorate and enhance the local economy. Finally, as we explore the economic landscape, we cannot overlook the substantial contribution of top earners, who command a significant portion of tax income. This reality underscores the necessity for targeted tax strategies that yield equitable outcomes for all sectors of society.
Welcome back to Business Week here on Arise News. I'm joined now by Oludamilare Adesola, Associate Director, Control Risk, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
Hi.
So the first story we're discussing is the impact of the tariff pause on Temu and Shein. These two companies are like twins, right?
Yeah.
It's a short-term truce. We don't know how long, whether this is going to be sustainable, but what's been the impact on these businesses?
So since the tariff war started in February, most of them have increased their prices. And so for Temu and Shein, for example, and they've increased it generally, not just specifically for US, because usually when you want to shop on those platforms, you put where you're shopping from, and then you adjust prices accordingly. Mm-hmm. But they increased their prices across the board, and so that's been the immediate impact of that. But now that a lot of them have been thinking long-term, Shein has been looking into moving its sort of manufacturing hub to Japan, and a lot of the other conversations of the long term, like you said, this is just a temporary pause. We don't know what's going to happen if they would actually reach a truce. routes and to what extent. But it seems like fast fashion is now being removed from it, even broader speaking, when they're having all these conversations.
Yeah.
They've seen that, the actual value is less than the $800 mark that they've said. Like the average package is about $54 that moves from Shein and Temu to the US. And so that direct to consumer sale is sort of just, it's small fish, and so they're focused on the steel, aluminum steel, and those big lithium battery, solar, and some of those bigger things. And so they've been able to negotiate to remove that fast fashion. Although there's a broader conversation about fast fashion and dumping and consumerism and all of that, but for now it seems like that has been.
But so these are shipments to the US. What about Temu and Shein with regards to the rest of the world? What is it about their business model that is so appealing that consumers literally here in our own society are falling over themselves to order from Temu and Shein?
I think initially it was a novelty, but then afterwards it's then gone to actually some ease because I'm also guilty of it. I had to catch myself the other day. I wanted to get the fly swatter, and I just went to Temu instead of going to Jumia or Konga or some of the local ones that we have. So I think sometimes it's just, just out of boredom or curiosity. But at the end of the day, it's that cheap price. The pricing makes the difference.
Even with the shipping charges, it's still cheaper.
They have free. It's free. Shein has a maximum, a minimum rather, but Temu is free. If you buy one item for 10K, you won't pay any shipping. I don't know what model they're operating, but that's how they've been able to sort of come in at that cheap price that some of the local folks can really match.
I know it's not really part of the main focus of this discussion, but do you have a view on the sustainability of the truce between the US and China on tariffs? I
do believe, I think it's needed. There's a conversation about what's going to, it's not about a fact of who's going to win. It's going to be who's going to be affected the least, because both of them will be significantly impacted negatively. And I think that sort of long-term outlook is what they're trying to reach. While Trump is trying to reduce the trade deficit, China is trying to boost exports and grow its economy. So they both have, their interests at stake. And I think because of that, there'll be some level of humility once they see that the other person, is, keeping up the good faith, I think, to that extent. But the instant that they start to see that, the other side isn't looking like they're going to budge or is looking like they're going to give me favorable terms, I think there might be some reversal. So there's still that risk and uncertainty.
But it also just goes to show how these geopolitical tensions actually impact real consumers. The UN has released a report saying that food insecurity, malnutrition amongst children will continue to rise for the 6th consecutive year. We're talking about 295 million people in 53 countries. I mean, this global food insecurity seems like something we should have tackled many years back. Why are we still dealing with this, and why are we still seeing these numbers?
So if you see the report, it contributes 3 factors that are driving these trends. So there's the conflict, there's the economic shock, some of these trade wars that we're talking about, and then there's also the climate change. And I think that while we have some focus on conflict and security, that like let's take it home to Nigeria, and moving away from some of those farmers being chased out of their communities for different reasons, terrorism attacks and all of that, and what that has done for the output. And there's been some ways that the government has sought to increase the presence of security personnel in those areas. But the other 2 factors, especially when it comes to economic shock and sort of shoring the local economy from that vulnerability, where it's just any small thing, the prices have gone up. There's a small conversation, and I guess that's the interconnectedness of globalization and the global economy that we're in. But the impact is usually outsized locally, and I think that it needs to be prioritized a lot more. And then there's also the conversations of climate change. I mean, ever so often, the Ministry of Environment would issue sort of a warning of flooding and all of that. But there's still not much being done, around, planning, deforestation. Those sort of concerns is not even look at the budget size of, the Ministry of Environment compared to others. It's not a priority when you're faced with so many other pressing issues. And I think that's what's driving some of these things. And in some instances, I think the government has pushed that responsibility to the NGOs and the third sector and the donor economy to sort out malnutrition, sort out polio, sort out all these things while we deal with the economy. And it's just from a fiscal constraint perspective.
I mean, I can see how the problem has to be tackled, both from a humanitarian side, in terms of humanitarian aid and humanitarian intervention, but also policy and, of course, climate, which then brings me to the Nigeria First policy, which Naseni has commended the president. on this kind of patronizing locally made goods. But can you tell us about the detail around this Nigeria First policy?
Yeah.
Is this more rhetoric than substance? If one or the other, how is this all going to work? Yeah.
So the Nigeria First policy, I mean, it's America first. Every government is looking to prioritize internal affairs over, foreign issues. But what we've seen is that this is really just about the procurement processes. So for the government, all the MDs.
So government procurement,
yes,
public sector.
Government, public sector.
Okay.
They're required to first seek Nigeria locally produced services, not just physical goods, but also service provision as well in tech and some of these other areas. And in the instance where they're unable to, they have to seek separate approval from the Bureau of Procurement to then say that we want to get this to BPP, we want to bring this product. And I think that that's very
it's a positive
thing. Yeah,
I agree.
It's the leading by example, and there's a whole conversation about what that's going to do for just the preference that we tend to have for foreign goods as opposed to local goods. There's just sometimes like, oh, if you want to hire someone with tech, it's like, oh, you have somebody who's coming in a suit and tie from Switzerland as opposed to somebody who is here. I went to Unilag. So I think that it's going to do a lot to just boosting that cultural perception. But at the same time, there's a lot more that's needed, because if those services are not being provided at the quality and the pricing that is competitive, then it's just going to balloon the budget for no reason.
And with any policy that announced, the devil is always in the detail, right? There's the implementation side of things. I think it's a fantastic idea to sort of promote and champion the using local goods and services. But I also think that if it's not properly monitored and instituted, then it can be open to all sorts of practices.
Exactly. People bring in their uncle and their auntie.
Yeah, so that's always the issue with these public procurement processes, that it needs to be seen to be fair and competitive. And I think those are the cardinal principles that need to govern any type of system around public procurement. But I think we then also need to, what are your thoughts on broadening out the conversation beyond the public sector? Because we talk about inflation, imported inflation, we're talking about global supply chain disruptions, to a broader economic strategy around a Nigeria First economic strategy.
I think it needs to go beyond the rhetoric, which is just saying, oh, there's a preference. There is a preference. I do believe that there's a preference. I don't think it's across board. I mean, just me speaking personally, I'll prefer a foreign-made cereal over a Nigerian-made cereal. There is that preference for some certain goods, but then I'm not going to pick some other goods, foreign goods. But at the same time, I think that it needs to be focused on the sort of operational challenges, because what the challenges that the industry is facing, the industrial sector is facing, it's not because people are preferring foreign goods. It's not just because, it's because their prices of like quality and price, and they're not able to be competitive, and it's cheaper to actually buy an imported good.
Well, it depends on where we're talking about, because one of the things that the gospel that's often preached for SMEs in terms of managing inflation and FX risks is to procure and manage your supply chain locally and source your raw materials locally, because that way you're spending naira for naira.
Yeah, I mean, in some instances it is, but I even think, we're going back to what we're talking about, Shein and Temu. If I was in, let's say, a Nigerian brand that's making fast fashion, and I'm importing all these materials, where's the platform? Where's the one platform that I can just go to and I've ordered, 100 yards of this material on it? So there is, apart from the ease, there's the price, there's so many different factors, and I think just broadening the rhetoric is good. Let's prefer local goods, but at the same time, it's like we need to move beyond that to actually deal with some of the issues.
It's interesting to say that these days most of my fashion is Nigerian made, so hopefully that is monocritical. So final comment on the tax reform bills that were passed, the four.
So I think that's an interesting and very positive direction that the government is moving towards. I think that a lot of so essentially at the core, where Nigeria is moving towards a more progressive tax regime. We're already a progressive tax regime, but it's even more so. And so where the lower income earners are being exempted, smaller companies are being exempted, under 50 million naira of annual income has been exempted from company tax, for example. And so what that would do, because again, if you look at our economy broad base, you see that about 10% of the top earners account for about 50% of all tax income, of all economic income. And so if you're looking to broaden your tax base, you should be looking to focus on essentially that top of the pyramid, and that's really where that growth can happen for tax income.
Yeah, and hopefully, I hope the economy will be able to absorb the rise in VAT. I know there have been a few complaints from different quarters, but all in all, we agree it's a relatively progressive tax regime. Thank you, Damilare, for being with us. Thank you.